Hello and welcome to the U.S. Center. Really excited for this event, Accelerating Adaptation and Investment, Enhancing and Activating the Role of Different Actors. And it's my honor to introduce the Deputy Chief Climate Officer of DFC, Aparna Srivastava.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you all hear me? No. Good afternoon. Can you all hear me? No. I'm hearing people say no. Should I just keep going? Louder. Hi. Can everybody hear me? Perfect. All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Aparna Srivastava. I'm the Deputy Chief Climate Officer at the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, DFC. Welcome to the Accelerating Adaptation Investment Panel here at the DFC, here at the U.S. Center at COP28, where we'll be looking at enhancing and activating the role of different actors. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce Scott Nathan, the Chief Executive Officer at the DFC. After being nominated by President Biden, Scott was confirmed by the Senate and took up this post in February of last year and has extensive experience across the public and private sectors throughout his career. His previous government service includes senior roles at the White House Office of Management and Budget and the U.S. Department of State. Prior to public service, Scott was for nearly 2 decades a partner and chief risk officer of the Baupost Group, a private investment partnership in Boston. Scott's leadership has helped orient all of DFC towards climate. His steadfast support is demonstrated not only by DFC's growing climate portfolio, but also the hiring of dedicated personnel across the agency to ensure sustained growth. Over to you, Scott.
Well, Aparna, thank you so much for that nice introduction, and thank you for what you and the whole climate team at the Development Finance Corporation do every day to advance the United States objectives to solve and address the climate crisis. Thanks for all your hard work. It's great to be here at the U.S. Center for this important topic, how we can accelerate solutions and finance to help deal with adaptation to the climate crisis. I look forward to the panel, listening to what they have to say, so I'm going to be brief. But I just did want to tell you a little bit about the United States International Development Finance Corporation and what we're doing on adaptation, how we fit into the overall U.S. government effort in this regard. So the Development Finance Corporation was created by the United States Congress just over 4 years ago. In fact, we were launched 4 years ago this week. And the purpose of creating us was to make development impact and also advance the strategic interests of the United States. We were purpose-built for addressing the climate crisis and working on climate finance. And as Aparna said, we've been reorienting our effort to help address this issue. It was only 2 years ago that our overall climate finance effort was below $500 million. Still important set of deals, but below $500 million. In the fiscal year that just closed 2 months ago, we've upped our game, and we're pleased to be able to say that we did $3.7 billion in climate finance. This is just the beginning. We're working to do even more. We're an agency that doesn't make policy, doesn't exist to do diplomacy, but instead is oriented toward transactions. So we're here at COP and we're traveling the world all throughout the year in order to look for deals that can help make a difference in addressing the climate crisis from the point of view of mitigation. But of course, we're also looking for deals that can help communities adapt to the impacts. The communities where we work in the developing world face this crisis in a more acute way than really any other communities around the globe. And we've heard from them that they're looking for ways that can help make them more resilient, build capacity. It's part of the United States government's initiative, PREPARE, the President's emergency I'm forgetting the acronym here. Candace is looking at me like I'm crazy. But yeah, it's a lot of letters. Prepare. The point is that we're part of that initiative and we're looking for adaptation investments. But I don't want to make it seem like this is something easy to do. We, as the Development Finance Corporation, mobilize capital to the private sector. We need to have commercial rationale for what we do. We need to do projects that are bankable. And that often is a challenge when you're looking at adaptation. Where we have found areas where we can work are in areas where we can deploy our full tool set: political risk insurance, loans, investments in funds, loan guarantees, and technical assistance. So the kind of things that we've done that help with adaptation are in preventing food wastage. We've done storage with agricultural producers and processors in India. We've helped work on cold chain, recently doing 2 deals, one in Senegal and one in Morocco. We've worked to provide insurance to farmers in Pakistan so that they can plan for their future, make their investments in seeds and fertilizer and fuel, knowing that even if there is a weather event, that they're still going to be able to get the kind of revenue they need to be able to pay back that kind of loan. We're working on data, providing good weather data to farmers in Africa, critical to be able to make planning for them as well. And we're emphasizing our investments to support small business and entrepreneurs that can work on adaptation. That's either through the support for financial institutions, which then on-lend to small businesses, or through investment funds, where we provide equity to investors who back these kind of business models. All of this is part of our effort that we're trying to grow every year and make an overall impact on this challenging problem. We're looking to do more. The United States government is looking to do more. It's why I'm pleased that there's going to be this great panel following my remarks. But I just want to put out the word that if you have good projects in this area, the United States International Development Finance Corporation is very much interested in talking to you, finding ways that we can provide financial support or risk mitigation to your efforts to help address this important challenge. So thanks very much for having me here today, and I look forward to the panel. Aparna, back to you.
Panelists to come join me up here. So as we all know, global temperatures and climate impacts and risks continue to increase, highlighting the urgent need for adaptation, finance for adaptation, action. I won't spend too much time talking about the figures because I think most of the people know, but with the adaptation gap report that came out just a few weeks ago, the need here that we're talking about is massive. On an annual basis within this decade, we're expecting to need between $200 and $380 billion per year. That being said, there is actually really great news on the horizon. From CPI's 2023 Global Landscape Report, adaptation financing is at an all-time high. It is at, I think it is estimated at over $60 billion a year. But unfortunately, there's kind of two key, considerations with that figure. One is that that figure is at least 10 times smaller than it needs to be. And also the majority of that is coming from public sector budgets. And so when we're thinking about how we fill those gaps, it's really essential to think about how can we really mobilize the entire ecosystem, whether that's philanthropy, or specifically the private sector. And so in support of PREPARE, the President's Emergency Plan for Adaptation and Resilience, the U.S. government, philanthropic organizations, private sector, we're all working together specifically to mobilize that additional financing to ensure resilient communities and resilient economies moving forward in emerging markets specifically. So I'm delighted to introduce this wonderful panel of experts. I'm joined here by Candace Valsing, the Senior Climate Advisor at USAID, Simon Young, the Managing Director at WTW Disaster Risk Finance and Parametrics, Paul Bodnar from the Bezos Earth Fund. He's the Director of Sustainable Finance, Industry and Diplomacy, Anjali Bansal, the founder and the founding partner, at Avana Capital, and Kathy Bachman-McLeod. I said that correctly. The CEO at Climate Resilience for All. And so to kick us off, I'll start with kind of a basic question to make sure that we can all really understand who's on the stage here. Could each of our panelists share a brief overview of your organization and the specific role you play in advancing climate adaptation and finance in emerging markets? Candace?
Thank you, Aparna. Yes, so USAID set out a very ambitious but achievable goal of catalyzing $150 billion in climate finance by 2030. And as part of that, the President Prepare, as Aparna noted, is a key component. So Prepare essentially helps to engage private sector to be part of the solution. A year ago, Administrator Power announced a call to action to try to pull the private sector into the solution of climate finance. As Aparna said, traditionally climate finance has been something that has been looked to for the government when it comes to adaptation. And I can say from my previous role at OMB that that's definitely true. We were often asked and told it's your role as the government to really finance adaptation, but that's not true anymore. We're going to be seeing some new analyses coming out that the administrator and BCG we'll talk about more later this week. But that's part of why we're here, and what we're trying to do is support additional private sector actors to come into the climate finance space. At USAID specifically, we're focusing on three things, really building capacity, being the ground game, and supporting blended finance. So when it comes to building capacity, USAID has been working for years with governments across the world to help support better enabling environments, whether it's regulations or laws that help enhance the ability for the private sector to invest in adaptation. For example, recently in Rwanda and Peru, we've done some great work that will help make it easier to invest in adaptation. When it comes to blended finance, we launched an edge fund. So the edge fund is really to help the private sector find where they have the edge in adaptation finance in other areas. And already about $24 million of the capacity that we have will go to adaptation. So we're really excited about this, and it's a really great opportunity to engage with the private sector to help support them in this work. And the third topic, just to talk about for a second here, is the ground game. So we have over 80 field offices across the world. And the administrator will often say, how can we help? How can we help you? So we are literally on the ground in those 80 field offices across the world helping to support and catalyze adaptation projects. So we have a variety of different mechanisms, and we're happy to be here to help.
Thanks, Aparna, and thanks very much for the invite. So I work for WTW, which is a risk advisory and broking company, so on the insurance side. But the team that I work with concentrates particularly on bringing the tools and the information that insurance needs and can generate to bear on problems of development, particularly within the climate risk context. So I've been doing this for almost 20 years now, bringing parametric solutions in particular, so a new form of insurance which triggers based on the parameters of an event rather than waiting for loss adjustment to happen. So it can happen much more quickly and can be transacted much more easily. And that can also be applied to a variety of different settings. So we're looking for ways to deploy these tools, but also the risk information that comes through insurance analytics, how that can help us to understand what are good investments in adaptation, what's the risk reduction benefit of certain investments, how's that going to change the risk profile both now and in the future under a more volatile climate. And really what we're doing is bringing those tools to new clients in new situations and deploying them to help to de-risk, including investments in adaptation.
Paul?
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation to be here. So the Bezos Earth Fund is implementing a commitment by Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, to provide $10 billion of grants to support climate action and nature protection over the course of this decade. And we're about $2 billion into that $10 billion commitment. Our primary areas of focus are decarbonization, environmental justice, and nature protection. So resilience and adaptation is not a primary focus for us, but of course, when you really dig into it, you find that these are tightly intertwined topics. And we're not going to be able to succeed in meeting our decarbonization goals, in advancing environmental justice, or in protecting nature if we are not simultaneously treating it as integrated with the job of building climate resilience. So as I think I'll talk a little bit more about later, we do have a very exciting project we're working on, which is focused, in fact, on spurring greater private sector investment in climate resilience solutions around the world.
Anjali?
Delighted to be here, and thank you for inviting me as well. I started Avana Capital, and Avana is a play on a Sanskrit word called Avahan. Avahan means call to action. So when we started Avana about 5 years ago, and all of us in Avana come from operating, investing, decades of technology investing successfully, the purpose of Avana was to take technology and innovation, of which there is a lot in India, apply it to large-scale problems, of which there are also a lot in India, and create large outcomes. As we started thinking about what is the biggest problem that the world is facing today, at heart we are all problem solvers, right? So when you see a problem, you kind of itch to solve it, and the channel we have chosen is investment and technology. The biggest problem facing the world today is climate. And climate change and creating a more sustainable, somewhat climate resilient world, because we may eliminate poverty, but we may not have a planet to live on. And that is the backdrop for Avana. We started the Avana Climate and Sustainability Fund about last year. We are the first fund in India that is a pure play thematic early stage technology fund focused on solving for climate. We invest in 3 areas, energy transition and resources, including land, air, water, mobility and supply chains, electric mobility, industrial decarbonization, supply chain, circular economy, and very importantly, food systems, so agriculture, with very hard lenses for mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. And needless to say, large part of our portfolio actually is adaptation solutioning, including adaptation financing. So I'll speak later about some of the projects that we see and we invest, but it is very exciting. We are seeing some absolutely outstanding founder talent choosing to solve for climate rather than solve for the next fintech and the next crypto and the next consumer tech. Although we like the capital that comes from consumer tech, right? But and we are also somewhat unique because given our backgrounds and the way we work, we engage very holistically, not just with the startup technology ecosystem, but also with the industrial space. I sit on several boards, including Tata Power, and thank you DFC for the large loan that you have just given for our solar project in Tata Power. As well as Nestle and Piramal, companies that are actually committed to making that transition to sustainability. We work closely with our policy ecosystem as well in India, in both shaping as well as guiding in some ways and creating the industry engagement. And then folks like DFC here, thank you, the catalytic capital space. So we sit at the intersection of these flows of information, knowledge, capital, and innovation, and really entrepreneurial energy that will solve problems.
I'm Kathy Boffman-McLeod, and I'm CEO of Climate Resilience for All. And our mission is to address the many aspects of extreme heat to protect lives and livelihoods of vulnerable communities. And we do that while prioritizing gender equity. And so through the lens of gender, we can have bigger, better impact because we know that women put 90% of what they make back into their communities. Men, just anybody want to guess the man number? Okay, another guess. We heard 10 up here. 10, anybody? 40. Who said 40? Winner. You get a sticker. 40%. And so what that means is this is a smart investment. And women are disproportionately harmed by heat. And that means physically, our bodies, it also means culturally, and it means economically, which is the most important thing for this conversation. And so women are missing their shifts because they have to be with their kids while men can work. Women have health effects that are slowing them down at work or keeping them from work. And so what we are doing is understanding the interventions that can help reduce the impacts and the risks to women. We are launching a micro insurance that comes with an early warning system and a piece of physical protection that is a physical thing that helps protect your health when you are working out in the sun and in the heat, and an early warning system through your the grassroots leaders. And this is in India and Pakistan. We're launching that on the morning of the 5th. And what that means is we're beginning to understand the economic models and the microinsurance parametrics, which who doesn't love insurance? Hands? Insurance? Yeah? No? It's great, right? Because it can help solve climate problems. That's really why we love insurance. Right, Simon? Yes, we do love insurance to solve climate problems. And it is a huge tool, and we're just scraping the surface with it. And so we'll understand the economic model of how microinsurance combined with risk reduction, combined with early warning systems, keeps women at work making money. And that's really important. And we'll talk more later. Thank you.
Great. So back to you, Candace. Can you share a little bit more about USAID's Climate Finance Development Accelerator and kind of other work that you have going on in adaptation?
Absolutely. Thanks, Aparna. So we're very excited about the Climate Finance Development Accelerator. So we announced it last year, and the goal is to mobilize $2.5 billion in private and public sector investment by 2030. And it's really to help countries meet the goals of their Paris Agreement on their own, in their own way. And we wanted to make sure that we were in line with, what you've heard so far. We were really partnering with the private sector to do that and to mobilize that finance. So we also, with the accelerator, we announced the Climate Finance Investment Network. Had very little members initially, but now we're announcing today that it has grown up to 700 members, which just shows the amount of initiative and interest in this topic. So first part one, 2.5 billion. Second part two, create this network that would help bring in the private sector to work with. Part three, we created a tool. So 2 months ago at UNGA, we announced an adaptation finance window. This is a tool where the private sector can come. We will help do some of the work for you. We'll help you streamline applications. It really focuses on two things. One, on the demand side, helping scale adaptation finance for companies seeking capital. And two, on the supply side, helping investment funds that are looking to scale. So the speed of the window and the interest has been astounding. In just those 2 months since UNGA, we've had 40 applications. And within those 40 applications, we selected 6 top applicants. One of them is here on the stage, and I won't steal their thunder. But we are announcing today those 6 winners. Like I said, one is here. Another one is Blue Marble, which, just to give you another example of how this adaptation window works. So through Blue Marble, they're essentially working with coffee producers around the world, mainly in countries like Indonesia. And what they will do through this project is it will provide additional insurance so that if there's a bad coffee farming year, if there's a drought, essentially it de-risks their investment in the coffee farming and helps them to be more sustainable. So very excited about the adaptation window. There's going to be another round coming up. Later this week, the administrator will announce its opening, so encourage everyone to apply. Very exciting work. We are really just using every tool we can at USAID to try to get at adaptation finance. The window, with just a few $1 million, we're going to leverage $18 million in adaptation finance, which is, doesn't sound like a lot, but it really is a lot when it comes to this work. So again, using every tool we have, really want to lean in here and engage the private sector, both through our Prepare call to action and then through these tools like the adaptation finance window.
Amazing. And I just want to jump in and say DFC is so excited about this window and so excited to be partnering with USAID because there's a lot of opportunity for some of the projects that are coming in through that window for also getting follow-on financing from us. So we're super excited about it.
Exactly. One team across the government.
Yes, one team across the government. I don't think the mic was on for that, so I'll repeat it. Simon, over to you.
Thanks, Aparna. So I just wanted to kind of start with a range of the projects that we have going on now, which are in some way related to applications of insurance, which, as Kathy said, is great, but particularly parametric insurance in the broadly kind of adaptation space. So we're working with UNICEF on their Today and Tomorrow initiative, which is trying to join together insurance for tomorrow with investments in risk reduction and preparedness today, and doing this at an institutional level so that the preparedness investments that UNICEF are making in lots and lots of countries around the world actually have impact and can be tied to better outcomes and supported by parametric insurance, which triggers very quickly and can flow into country for response. So, and in doing so, we are kind of creating a continuum of the understanding of the risks and how they're evolving and how communities and households can respond better. We're also doing reef insurance. So to your point, Paul, about natural systems and the protections that they can bring, the biodiversity benefits. We're doing reef insurance in the Mesoamerican reef. We're doing it in Hawaii with TNC. And here we are applying parametric insurance tools to enable response after hurricanes, which badly damage coral reefs. And if you actively intervene in the 2 months after a hurricane hits a reef, then you have the outcomes are massively better for reef recovery. And so this is a case where we are allowing for the planning and response to these events by guaranteeing financing when they occur. And I need to flag Kathy again. Kathy was a very early mover on this work, and I think we're all pretty happy with where it's gotten to, but certainly plenty of room for expansion. And then in the Pacific, we're working with the Risk Pool to develop a drought insurance product, which has two triggers. So an early trigger, which is synced into the alert system for drought response in that country. And what that allows us to do is to have funds flow when the alert thresholds are met, and not leave it to the politicians to have to decide whether they're actually going to do the actions that are in the plan, because they're better off politically, they think, in saying, well, it's going to rain a week or two after, so they don't execute, they don't go and get the budget to execute. So by supporting that through these automatically triggered payments, which have been paid for in advance through a premium, and then most of the money will flow when the drought's in full swing, but you will have made a lot of gains in terms of limiting the impact of that drought by that first intervention. And so that's just a kind of a highlight. And then to go on to the actual project that we're going to be executing with the EDGE funding under the adaptation finance window. We are going to be working very closely with Aparna and the team at DFC to develop a platform where we can put parametric insurance wrappers around debt issuances by DFC on adaptation projects in the private sector. And the key observation, and I think, Aparna, you mentioned the range of things that DFC does. One of them is political risk insurance, but one of them isn't regular climate insurance. And if you're doing an adaptation project, you can't go to a local broker and buy an insurance policy against whatever it is you're doing, or very rarely in the kind of markets that we're talking about. So what we're planning to do is build a facility that allows you to put a wrapper around the repayments of that loan, because that's the thing we want to protect primarily, is the ability of a business to maintain its credit, to maintain its payments on its loan. So that gives it some breathing space to then get back on its feet. It's not insuring the whole business. It's not insuring. It's not paying off the entire loan. What it is doing is giving some breathing space. And we think if we do this at scale, and build a platform, then that'll allow us to enter the market in a positive way, to get good pricing on those products and get a transaction stream going. We can also leverage the great climate analytics that DFC is already doing on their analytics on the loan itself. So we think there's really good progress can be made in protecting and ultimately making them more bankable for private sector investors as well. So the edge funding is not going to pay for everything, but we are going to be doing some pilots. We're building the concept of the facility, and we're going to be doing some pilots and hopefully demonstrate that this can really get to scale very quickly.
Great. Thanks, Simon. In case people missed it, WTW is the recipient of that edge funding that was being referred to. Really excited about the concept that's being developed. Yes, congratulations. So, Paul, over to you. I know that you mentioned that adaptation finance isn't actually one of your key kind of focus areas, but would love to hear how, the Bezos Earth Fund is really thinking about adaptation financing and how you can catalyze support for more mainstream financing.
Thank you. For the first part of this panel, I thought you had set up a hedge fund, but now I understand it's an edge fund. So that's really helpful clarification. So before I joined the Earth Fund, I spent a couple of years on Wall Street. And today, every investment professional on Wall Street understands why decarbonization is an exciting investment theme. Right? And it has made a huge difference to have capital markets engaged in driving that forward, right? The availability and cost of capital, having that rush in as it has from project finance to corporate finance has had a huge impact. But if you asked a banker or an asset manager on Wall Street, what is adaptation finance? They would kind of give you a puzzled look, and they would imagine that it's some kind of a line item on a government budget. That has to change because we must and we can activate capital markets to support adaptation and resilience, just as we have successfully done for decarbonization. So that is the focus that we have. And what the way that we look at it is, yes, it's true that a lot of adaptation investments are going to be done by governments. By the way, not just governments, but also companies and households, right? And those are costs. Unfortunately, adaptation will have a high price tag for the world. But that price tag is not fixed. And one of the things that it depends on is how fast we develop the solutions, the technologies, the products, the services that are needed to climate-proof life on Earth, which, if you look at it that way, is itself a growth industry. Just like healthcare, right, is an industry that we understand exists to help people who get sick, but we understand how important it is to drive financial finance into the healthcare sector to innovate with drugs, treatments, different care models. So we need to start thinking about adaptation finance a little differently, or in addition to understanding the costs and adding up those scary numbers about how much we're going to have to spend on it, we need to also think about how climate resilience solutions needs to be understood as a growth industry, because it is. And we're not talking about rocket science, right? This is water pumps, air conditioning, engineering services, wildfire analytics, right? The basic building blocks of what governments and households and companies are already demanding and will be demanding in greater and greater numbers. And so if we can make capital markets understand that they should be just as excited about investing in this area as they are in decarbonization, or even more so because, again, unfortunately, there's much less uncertainty associated with the growth in demand for resilience products and services than there is with decarbonization, because decarbonization does, after all, depend on how fast policy is made and so on. That's not really the case for resilience. We understand what's coming at us, and frankly, no matter what decisions we make here on decarbonization over the next few years, won't affect necessarily the pace of climate events for the next decade or more. So what we're doing at the Bezos Earth Fund is we're partnering with a number of organizations to create to clarify this case for investing in climate resilience solutions and to create the toolkit for investors to be able to do that. There are thousands of investment funds and banks in the world that have not looked at this, and we're going to give them a head start in doing that. So we're working with the Global Adaptation and Resilience Investment Working Group, which Jay Coe in the back leads. We're working with the ClimateWorks Foundation, who you'll hear from in a moment. We're working with MSCI Sustainability Institute. MSCI is the world's largest financial research and data. Bouquet of microphones. And yes, we are going to be working with some of the world's largest asset managers to roll out investment funds that any retiree, any of you that has a retirement account, should be able to invest in climate resilience solutions, and soon you'll be able to do that.
Amazing. Thanks, Paul. Anjali, can you share a little bit more about how you're thinking specifically around financing for innovation and frontier technologies related to adaptation?
So guys, we think tech can solve most things, along of course with all the human ingenuity that drives some of that. We start with assuming good intent. People, corporations, governments, systems overall want to decarbonize, want to create a more sustainable world. Why do we not do it? Because the solutions don't really exist. And the current solutions are too expensive to be adopted at scale. So the trick here, which is absolutely critical for unlocking adaptation, mitigation of course, and I think we, in some ways, all our conversations tend to get centered around reducing carbon, decarbonization, net zero and so on. I think the conversation really has to move beyond that. It has to go beyond the net zero piece and think about the here and now. Of course carbon, but the here and now, which is adaptation as well as resilience. Resilience is even harder to measure in some ways, and fewer economic models exist. But adaptation is a very clear economic case. The market does play a role, and Paul was talking about. Most of us come from those kind of backgrounds, whether it is in banking or in private equity, which I did earlier as well. This is good business. It's not just about saving the planet. Today, for example, a new unit of solar or hybrid energy actually costs less than a new unit of thermal. Wasn't the case 15 years ago, because 15 years ago the technology was not ready, it was too expensive, it required government subsidies, which means the market was not ready. However, a lot of these spaces will require public or government policy intervention to catalyze, to perhaps create the incentives. In India, we have seen a dramatic acceleration of EV adoption because of a government policy called FAME, and that we'll continue to see going forward. But the private markets, both on the consumption side as well as the capital side, do have to come in, and that is where technology plays a role. When new solutions come in, technology cost curves decline. It makes adoption more possible at scale. Adoption happens in large companies, industries. I used to say that sustainability is the next digital. I've changed my mind. It's actually bigger than digital. Digital was nice, it was convenient, it created lots of value and money and returns. Sustainability is actually core. It's species continuity, business continuity, and I'll give you a couple of examples of the kinds of things we do. And we do believe that in countries like India, where we have a very young entrepreneurial population, highly technology enabled, we are currently doing like 10 billion UPI transactions, digital payment transactions a month now. Where we have leapfrog, we will also create leapfrogging technologies to solve for the poor. So if we can solve for 1.4 billion Indians, we can definitely use that to solve for the global south. We have companies like Iki Foods. Iki is growing tomatoes, eggplants, cucumbers, green chilies in the desert of Rajasthan. And this is not sort of boutique scale vertical farming. This is almost industrial scale farming, 80% less water usage, marginal electricity, no greenhouse. And this is because they have now got a patented polymer-based growing chamber system where they manage the root environment of the plant. They create 6 crops a year versus 2, and are able hence to do 4x yield per acre. They're growing tomatoes at about 12 cents a kilogram in 50 degrees Celsius temperature, 80% less water usage. That, friends, is actually the future of food production. And because if this can be done in the desert of Rajasthan, it can be done in the GCC. So obviously they have interest now in coming from GCC. Food security is an issue everywhere. There's energy security and there is food security. So this is a company that is building in India, for the world. We've also invested in a company that's actually making rooftop solar and the solarization, if you will, both of agriculture as well as small businesses. Small businesses don't have access to low-cost capital. They tend to borrow on personal rates, paying 22-24% interest. And Aram, which is this company, they have created a full-stack technology solution connecting the installers in markets in the global south. India is a good representation of the global south. They're all micro businesses, unorganized, low on scale, very low on technology, giving them the tools to then create bids and bid for projects for rooftop for small businesses again. So really solarizing small businesses, converting that into an asset-backed finance product, and consequently then also looping it back because their technology treats the solar plant as a real-time connected machine and is able to do the underwriting models for lower financing and insurance. So this AROC. So we have companies like this that are coming out. Kazam, that is creating the interoperability layer for all charging infrastructure for EVs. The big bottleneck for electric mobility adoption is charging. And unlike the US, India is an open architecture policy stance, and much like we have done in financial payment systems, same thing is happening in charging. So Kazam's creating this unbundled, it's hardware agnostic, it works with multiple charge point operators, multiple OEMs, and thus creates the data bank that also allows for far more efficient use of charging infrastructure. So I can go on, and this very exciting technology, but it does require a different kind of capital lens. It will not be the B2B SaaS hockey stick. A lot of it is hardware. A lot of it will require manufacturing. You know, we are looking at a company that is doing, finding locally resident microbial colonies in effluent water, and not just cleaning that up. And she's a woman, PhD in chemistry, who discovered that when she keeps concentrating it, it leads to acetate and eventually leads to 99.999% pure biohydrogen, which then goes back into the manufacturing process. We are seeing companies that are taking, why do we use plastics? Because we don't have an alternative. When we've done the analysis to move out of multi-layer plastic is a 5 to 15% increase in COGS. No company can afford it. Consumer doesn't want to pay for it. So what's the alternative? We need alternative materials. 70 years ago, plastic was a miracle material that helped us extend shelf life for food. Today, it is a problem. So we have to find the new miracles of today and hope they're not problems of tomorrow, but those miracles have to be found.
Wonderful. Thank you. It's fantastic to hear just so many tangible examples of how this work is really moving forward. Please.
And I know just because we are passing through you on gender, we happen to be 3 women who are running the fund, which we find quite interesting because composition of the room does matter. And we find some phenomenal female founders working on deep tech problems in engineering and science to solve for climate. So we're very excited about that.
Wonderful. Thanks. And over to you, Kathy. Can you tell us more about how Climate Resilience for All is really working on kind of investable solutions on adaptation and specifically on the insurance side of things?
Yes, and as I said, we're focused on extreme heat, and so the solutions for extreme heat in terms of green roofs and cool roofs and architectural design and physical built environment solutions, all of these are capital investments and thinking about infrastructure and extreme heat. And so they're part of the challenge that I think, Paul, you're going to solve, or we're going to solve as a community, is that how do you make money saving money? If we're reducing the risks of climate impacts with investments, things that protect you or reduce your impacts, what are the models where there are cash flows associated with reducing risks? And I think the key, and I think all of the pieces are there, and you just described a big part of them, is the ingenuity and the entrepreneurial thinking, but the blending of different ways. You're looking at a blend of risk reduction, and then you've got things that have cash flows, and we have to see some things that perhaps did not have monetary value as having value. And so looking across, and you all may have, I hope we're going to hear about this from Jess, that the philanthropic community has come together and said there are principles of the role of philanthropy in advancing adaptation finance, that from philanthropy across insurance and de-risking into blended finance vehicles, we get all the way to the capital markets. We need some coherence across there to help investors and to help move money. And so that's a role that we seek to play, is to help bring some of that coherence, because we work across that. But I think the key thing is to think about, you mentioned a lot of those products. What are the clothes that we're going to be wearing? What are the flood risk reduction or the personal things we're going to need to know in our own survival? I mean, when we think about, if our mission is to help build the protection for people and livelihoods in the face of climate impacts, what are the things that help people help themselves? And so this is gotta have knowledge, gotta have tools, and that means what are all of those things? And then what are the systems and the environments we're living in, and how are they screened for climate? And then how are the business models and cash flows from the chain of the individual, the employee? I mean, even thinking about what infrastructure is doing to support people to get to work in the face of all of this. We know the metros are closing down and schools are closing because of heat or because of flood. You know, what are the ways that we keep people getting to work? Because that's part of how we keep the money moving. And so we also want to protect health. And so people are interested in protecting their own health. And so micro insurance for heat sold in Japan for people who didn't want to cancel their plans. And if they were canceled by heat, they paid for an insurance product. So we have everything that we need. We do need a little more coherence on the field, and the mitigation finance team is about 40 years in front of us, so we've got some catching up to do. And it doesn't have to be as black and white as that. We know that this is a gray area of blended approaches, but thinking about risk reduction on one side and how we monetize that, and then thinking about the cash flows, and then what's the world that we're going to live in where people can continue to go to work and live their lives in the face of what we know is coming right now. That's a start.
Amazing. It's tough to try to kind of distill so much that's happening, but I think one of the key things I'm feeling at the moment is just a lot of inspiration and hope. I think when we talk about adaptation and we hear about kind of adaptation financing flows, it's often kind of focused and centered on the gaps. And I think if I can leave with just two key takeaways before turning it over to Jess for our closing remarks, is that one is that adaptation financing is at an all-time high. There's more to go, but we're well on our way there, and I really hope that people can really carry with them the amount of work that's happening across the entire ecosystem, whether it is philanthropy, civil society, government, really thinking about how we can accelerate adaptation financing. I'll give a shout out to Jay Coe and all of the others in the room that are really kind of thinking about this space and figuring out how we can push this forward quickly and at scale. So with that, let me turn it over to Jessica from ClimateWorks for our closing remarks. Thanks. I think we can maybe take our seats back too.
Hi, everyone. So great to be here. My name is Jessica Brown. I am one of the directors at ClimateWorks Foundation, and just really want to say how amazing it is to be closing out this fantastic panel. Not only are these incredible institutions up here, but also incredible individuals that are so committed to this work, and it's really wonderful to be closing this out and just sharing a couple remarks. There will be a quiz when you leave the door. You'll have to share what the acronym PREPARE stands for, so please do prepare for that. So we heard a little bit about, well, we heard a lot about various and distinct pieces of innovative and innovation happening in the adaptation resilience investment space. And I think just listening to the panel, to me, the real beauty is what happens when we combine all these various pieces, right? So really making sure that we are working along the entire investment value chain, which is a little bit what Kathy mentioned. We heard from USAID, who's focused on the building of the capacity, on playing the ground game, on doing those blended finance mechanisms. DFC is working to provide below market debt and provide the guarantees that are needed to make the investments flow. WTW and Climate Resilience for All are providing various types of insurance mechanisms, parametric insurance, microinsurance. Avena Capital is working on early stage private equity investment, and then Bezos and Paul is working on engaging capital markets and really making sure that the investment case is made. So all of these pieces distinctly are so critical, but it's really when we combine all of them that we can see the value of working along that investment chain. And I think once we do that, we really will see transformation happen at scale. Philanthropy has a really critical role to play. We heard a little bit about this already from Paul and his bouquet of microphones. But also, just to say a little bit more, philanthropy really is a tiny player in this space in terms of overall dollar amount, but we can play a very critical role. We can help build the capacity. We can help advocate for new things. We can create that investment case. We can take big risks. We can act nimbly. We can experiment. We can support research and development. And I think critically, we can also provide the connective tissue that brings together these various actors so that we are not working in silos, which I think, unfortunately, does happen more than we want to admit. And unfortunately, philanthropy has been largely absent in the adaptation and resilience space. But I'm very happy to share that I would say the tides are turning. We, ClimateWorks Foundation, along with 10 other foundations, launched a call to action yesterday, where we are all now committing to really change the game on philanthropy's role in adaptation and resilience. We have been undergoing a series of conversations and dialogues over the past year to really understand what the role of philanthropy is in helping support and build out adaptation and resilience at the global level, what our role is working in partnership with various other players and actors and institutions. And the call to action that was launched yesterday commits these 11 foundations. And I will share there's many more foundations that are supporting this effort. It's much bigger than the 11, but we were, for various reasons, some foundations are not keen on signing public statements for not because of the content, but because of other aspects. So there are many more behind this statement. And with this statement, what we are committing to is increasing and scaling our investment. We are committing to work together to develop a joint strategic plan to really figure out what role we can all play in helping shift this work and scale action and scale investment. We are committed to reporting and being transparent about our progress over time. So I'm thrilled with the call to action. I encourage everyone to take a look at that. And if you are a funder or involved in a foundation, we very much encourage you to sign on. We also heard that adaptation finance is at an all-time high this year. And what I challenge everyone here today is that we also work to make sure that this year going forward is going to be the lowest level. So let's work together to make sure that happens. Thank you, everybody.